Hello everyone and welcome to CRTV 131 Contemporary American Cinema Class 12, and we are working our way from the 1990s into the 2000s and very rapidly up to the present day. And I probably have told you this at least once or twice before, but bears repeating. Thanks to consensus and perspective, we have a pretty good viewpoint of what great movies have been in the past, from 2001 to Citizen Kane, from Lawrence of Arabia to The Graduate and The Godfather. But we are getting very, very close to the present day, and we don't have the perspective that would be nice to have. So we don't really know where our classic films are going to be, but I am very confident that we know our directors. And that is why we are a director-centric class. We're going to talk about some of their great movies. But like I say, we don't really know which one of these are going to be the classic movies that are going to really stand the test of time for the next 30, 40, 50 years or so. But I'm confident that all of these directors will be in, or continue to be in, the history books and the textbooks. They're all in our textbook right now. But as to which of their great films they're going to be, only time will tell. All right, let's dive in. And first up, we have Guy Ritchie, and he is English, and he is known for having voiceover and narration in most of his what were dubbed lad films, sort of like Guy films or something like that over there in Britain. He has made 4 of them so far. Snatch is one of the middle ones. So we get voiceover, we get narration. He likes to play around with the technology of film and digital technology. So oftentimes he will do speed change, where things will maybe go from slow motion to normal to very fast. And numerous plot threads, which I find a lot of fun. I like to be surprised. I don't like to see what's going to happen a mile in advance. I like to be surprised, and Guy Ritchie usually manages to surprise me in film after film. So the lad films take place in the British underworld. Could be drugs, could be illegal boxing, all sorts of illegal sorts of stuff. These are not gangsters or mobsters or anything like that. But it is the underworld, and mostly what they are about is something illegal. Something illegal of some sort. And so these are the films. Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. That's the one that really put him on the map. Got Notice. Snatch, which is the one that I usually show in class. And I've got links to quite a bit of it for you that more or less mirror what I'd be showing in class. Then there's Rock and Rolla, and then he took a gap, quite a gap. I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years. He did 2 Sherlock Holmes movies. He did Aladdin. He did some other stuff, and then just this spring he did The Gentleman, which is definitely right in there with all those other really wonderful films. So there we have Sherlock Holmes. There were 2 of those. He did A Man from U.N.C.L.E., not very successful. And he did King Arthur, also not very successful. Still full of that style that he has with the narration and the speed change and the plot and some of the plot threads and so on, but not quite what he was doing in his earlier days with lower budgets, frankly. They're not really big action movies, so he didn't need $100 million or anything like that. Whereas The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and King Arthur were bigger budget movies, lots of CGI and all that kind of stuff. And Aladdin, for sure, for Disney, and part of what Disney's new emphasis has been doing live action remakes of their classic animation. Aladdin, either they're on the way or they've been done with Lion King and Little Mermaid and all those classic movies that they made, those musicals that they made back in the 90s and 2000s. And he does action quite well. So he did okay with Aladdin, but it's a little hard to tell. It feels a lot more like a Disney movie than a Guy Ritchie movie. Whereas just this spring, on probably a fairly low budget, well, at least compared to those last ones, the Sherlock Holmes movies and Man Phone Call and all that, he sort of snuck in under the radar. The Gentleman, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It reminds me of those earlier 3 films, and I was so glad that he did that. Maybe he needed to do it for, I don't know, self-respect or somehow to remind everybody what made him a director of note in the first place, not a director of big genre franchise type movies like the other ones, but of these wonderful little very, very British movies, thick, heavy British accents and slang and all that kind of stuff. So I think they're a lot of fun. Check out the links that we have to Snatch and The Gentleman, and then come back and we will move on. And Charlie Kaufman is next up, and he is primarily known as a writer. And we haven't talked about too many writers in this class. He's done a little bit of directing, but mostly he's known for writing these wonderful, weird films dealing with reality and identity and that sort of thing. A little bit like Philip K. Dick with the identity and so on. We talked about him way back when we were talking about Blade Runner. So there's a little bit of that. And also sort of self-referential types of movies, what they call meta, sort of about itself. And Fellini was doing that back with 8.5 and some movies like that. So he's not the first one to do that, but it's very interesting how he is sort of self-referential and movies about themselves, I guess, about making a movie. So being John Malkovich, that's the one that really put him on the map. He had written a couple of others, but this one really caught everybody by a very happy surprise. And it's hard to describe, very hard to describe. And so I usually say, you got to check out, the clips and the trailers and all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit easier to tell, but some of this stuff, frankly, a lot of this stuff is a little hard to describe. It's a little hard to describe some of Christopher Nolan's stuff. It's hard to describe Charlie Kaufman's stuff. And even back when we were talking about some of the films from the 1970s, like Being There with Peter Sellers, a lot of these movies are just hard to describe. And that's kind of a continuing theme, which is how, if I have trouble describing this movie and it's hard to describe what's going on in the trailer, how in the world is the poor marketing department going to get the word out on a movie like this? Or those other ones that we were talking about, like maybe Inception. They're not franchise movies. They've got stars that you've heard of, but somebody that finds a portal into somebody else's mind, with being John Malkovich, or even with Inception, dream within dream within dream. I mean, this is hard to sell and hard to market. So good for them, good for the studios for releasing this stuff, and good for the directors and the writers for making them. Sorry to the marketing departments and the advertising departments and all that, but I'm so happy that these kinds of movies are still being made. They're not big budget movies or anything like that. Well, Inception, I guess, is, but they're still weird and strange and quirky and not of the ordinary and not of franchises or anything like that. And I'm very happy that they're making these kinds of movies as well. Adaptation is also a lot of fun, and in Adaptation, the lead actor, played by Nicolas Cage, is named Charlie Kaufman. And Nicolas Cage also plays Charlie's fictitious twin brother, Donald Kaufman. And Charlie Kaufman has, in the movie, Charlie Kaufman in the movie Adaptation has just finished writing Being John Malkovich. And so it is very meta. It's very much about itself and so on. It is just a real mind bender, a real trip. And I'm not really sure the trailer does justice to it, but that's what it's about, and it is a ton of fun as well with some other bigger stars. Meryl Streep's in it and some other people. Also, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind with Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet, or Winslet, I'm not sure. And they have a romantic affair, and it doesn't end very well. And so the Kate Winslet character goes to a clinic to have Jim Carrey's character erased from her memory. So a little fantasy, a little sci-fi. And so she won't remember any of him or anything like that. So he decides he's going to try to do the same thing. Again, a very out there, very strange movie. All the Charlie Kaufman stuff is just so inventive. And he also did Anomalisa, which is a stop motion film. And we will talk a little bit more about stop motion directors. We've already met Tim Burton, and we have Charlie Kaufman and Wes Anderson's coming up. Actually, Wes Anderson's next. So watch the Charlie Kaufman stuff and then come back. And Wes Anderson, primarily known for his very symmetrical design. It's a lot of fun, and color and all that. A lot of people describe it as a dollhouse. If you know what a dollhouse is, maybe you didn't have one, but you know what they are, and the wall pulls down. Usually there's a hinge or something, and the wall pulls down, and then there are all the different rooms in the dollhouse that you can pose your little figurines and things like that. I don't know how popular they are for children these days, but I think most people know what a dollhouse is, and that's how they work. So he has lots of cross-section type sets, whether it's a submarine or a train or a house or an apartment or a hotel or a foxhole, really, in his stop motion film. So a lot of fun with that, the design and everything. It's just so inventive and so much fun. Tracking shots, very quirky humor. Bill Murray type humor. I don't know if that helps you out or not, but Bill Murray is in every Wes Anderson film except his very first one, I believe. And probably with his very first film, he couldn't afford Bill Murray, or he would have been in that one too. But he's been in every one with small parts, walk-on parts, and very large parts ever since. Very large casts. A lot of the same people appear in his films, film after film after film. And his most recent film, they sort of go through a list of the people that are in it, including Bill Murray, Cate Blanchett, Jeff Goldblum, I think, is in it. I'm trying to remember. And anyway, Owen Wilson seems to be in most of his films, and you'll get a chance to see. So I usually concentrate on Moonrise Kingdom. I love Grand Budapest Hotel, and I would love to show parts of it. But one of the things that I'm looking for my class, I don't like just showing bunches of trailers, and sometimes I just kind of have to, especially online. It's a little harder to find scenes on YouTube that are the same scenes that I'd be showing in class, and sometimes I have to jump around a little bit. It's wonderful if I can just show a 15 or 20 minute section of the film near the beginning, like I could do with Pulp Fiction. I mean, that was just perfect. Everything was right there. I didn't have to jump around and confuse you in the audience. but sometimes it just doesn't quite work. I kind of have to make my own trailer, I guess, and I'd rather not do that. Moonrise Kingdom, I have to jump around maybe once or twice. It's not too bad. But Grand Budapest Hotel, I just couldn't figure out how to do it. It's actually nested. There's a story within a story within a story. That makes it kind of hard. Every time we go to a different period in time, he emulates the film style and the aspect ratio. So when we go back to the 1930s, the aspect ratio is very square. And then we get a little further and the aspect ratio changes and the color palettes change. And that made it kind of hard. And so it's just kind of hard. He's hard. I love him, but it's a little hard to show his style in a really good way. So sometimes the trailers are there. But anyway, I found a few scenes for Moonrise Kingdom that work quite well. The trailer for Grand Budapest Hotel, and then the trailer for his brand new film. I'm very excited about it. It's not out yet, maybe in the fall. The French Dispatch, with all of those named people in it. And I've got the trailer there too. So that is a ton of fun, or it looks like it's going to be a ton of fun. I love it already. And he has done 2 stop motion films, Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, or if you say it fast, I Love Dogs. And so I've linked to that trailer, and we will hear lots of the voices. Edward Norton's been in the last 3 or 4 movies, so we're going to hear him, and some people that haven't been in any of his recent movies, like Bryan Cranston. We'll hear his voice and a few other people. Stop motion. So let's take this moment to talk about directors who have worked with stop motion. Now, in the early days, stop motion was what our big CGI movies do. So King Kong was a stop motion film. I'll talk about King Kong when I go through special effects and CGI and all that. And so the big monster movies, like King Kong and like Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans and movies like that with big mythical beasts and monsters, was all done in stop motion. But since CGI came along in the early 1990s, movies that were actually slated to be in stop motion, like Jurassic Park, were made with CGI. That has left stop motion for mostly the sorts of movies. They look 3D. They look like a digital 3D movie, like a Pixar movie, but they are stop motion. There are little figurines, and there we see right here, they're holding the little figurines and everything. They're posable. They have little skeletons underneath all of that. They can be posed, and they are moved a fraction of an inch at a time, and then when it is all run together, they appear to be in motion. So Tim Burton has 3, Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, and Frankenweenie. Wes Anderson has the 2, Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, and Charlie Kaufman has 1, and there are probably a few more of directors of note. There are stop motion movies being made, but they are mostly being made by stop motion specialty directors or specialist directors who do that sort of thing, and not directors who do lots of live action and then do stop motion. So that's sort of my division there. There's plenty of fantastic stop motion movies out there, but they're not done by big time directors. And speaking of big time directors, okay, so check out the stop motion links, and then we'll move on. David O. Russell, American director, and American Hustle. And when we talk about the difficulty in translating foreign films and that sort of thing, from whether it's from especially far off cultures, Western Europe, French, Italy, not quite as foreign as Asian or African or something like that. So the language, using different alphabets and all that sort of thing. Anyway, I usually, I just read that that in China, I think in China in particular, they had a real hard time translating hustle. And it's a very specifically American sort of a word. So I'm not even sure if hustle translates into French or Italian very well. But I know it was one of those words that is very difficult to translate. Here we see a lineup of pretty top-notch actors and actresses: Christian Bale, Bradley Cooper, Jeremy Renner, Amy Adams, and Jennifer Lawrence, and they have been used in a number of David O. Russell films in one configuration or another. And that's a pretty good group of actors to be stuck working with, I guess you could say. What makes American Hustle unique is 2 first-person voiceovers. And the voiceover, the first-person voiceover, the interior monologue, sometimes it's called. Importantly, we get in their heads. We know their thoughts. It's not the sort of voiceover that you get in a documentary where there's somebody narrating, but we know their thoughts. And so we can really, well, hopefully empathize with them. Sometimes we can see what people are doing, and sometimes we can see that with interior thoughts like that, with this sort of voiceover, that they're thinking one thing and doing another. And we can't really get that if we're just looking at a film. Okay, but when we hear their thoughts and then we see what they're doing, Woody Allen did a little bit of that in Annie Hall. He sort of illustrated that, as a matter of fact, and that was kind of helpful. So anyway, 2. Some have had even more. Some films or television shows have had even more. I think at the risk of possibly confusing the audience, who knows. This film also has a framing device, and we always call attention to movies that have these rare techniques, whether it's nonlinear, whether it's voiceover, or a framing device, or a few other things like that. We always call attention to it because it's a very small fraction of the total output. So that's one of the things we always want to do is find that rare quality. So there we go. There's the group that he frequently works with. Robert De Niro has done a couple too. Not usually the leads. Usually it seems to be Christian Bale and Jennifer Lawrence seem to have the real leads. But anyway, Bradley Cooper definitely had the lead in Silver Linings Playbook with Jennifer Lawrence. So that was a pretty good pairing. That was really good. Three Kings, about the Gulf War of 1990, 1991. Very interesting. Mark Wahlberg and George Clooney. The Fighter, with Christian Bale winning an Oscar, and Silver Linings Playbook. And I've linked to Silver Linings Playbook. That is a lot of fun. And I've got the trailer for that, and it's not hard to find. I don't know if it's on Netflix or where, but a lot of students tend to write papers about Silver Linings Playbook. So that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. Okay, check those out. And we have Edgar Wright. And Edgar Wright is British. He started in television. He's one of our newer additions to the class. He might be in his 30s, closing in on 40s. That amazingly, for a director, 40 is pretty young. Okay, there aren't too many directors of note that have enough work to get into textbooks and classes and things like that. And so some of our really good directors, like Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick, people like that, they have done enough work by their 30s. But otherwise, it seems to take a little while to really reach your full speed. And so Edgar Wright now, he's got enough films under his belt to have developed a style and a following very fast action style editing, mostly comedies until Baby Driver, which has some funny bits in it, but it's not nearly as funny as his earlier films. Let's take a look. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. And then and Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is not as British as the first three, but is also nearly a comedy. Lots of action and nearly a comedy. And then Baby Driver, which has quite a bit more drama in it. But all of his movies have a wonderful style, a wonderful editing style, and I have linked to a wonderful short little documentary on YouTube on Edgar Wright on editing comedy, and it shows all of his films and does a really nice job. The guy that does that, it's Every Frame a Painting. You'll see it. Every Frame a Painting is the name of the series that the person does there on YouTube. And if you like that one, then you might check out some of the other mini docs that he does on movies. Every Frame a Painting. In the meantime, I have a nice link to Baby Driver and Every Frame a Painting, and enjoy all of those. As a side point, a number of big franchise type movies have started to try to entice good directors to do them, and certainly we have Tim Burton doing the Batman movies and Christopher Nolan doing some Batman movies, but most of the time the franchise is really the key, and the people that are running things don't want a director to put too much of their own style in that movie. It's all about Star Wars. It's all about, the Avengers, something like that, and they don't want to change it up too much. And to that end, poor Edgar Wright was slated to do an Ant-Man movie, and I think it would have been really good. We've seen 2 Ant-Man movies now, and they're the lighter of the Marvel movies. They're not as heavy as the Captain America movies or anything like that. And it's really too bad. It's really too bad. They wanted to give him a shot. Apparently he worked on it for quite a while, for a year or more, and couldn't make it work out. So who knows? Who knows? We'll see what happens. But it is kind of fun when very auteur-ish directors get a chance to do something perhaps in a franchise like that. Okay, so lots of good links. Check them all out. And that is it for today, this week, for Contemporary American Cinema, Class 12. Lots of good stuff. We're getting closer and closer to the present day. And next class, we have Christopher Nolan, Bong Joon-ho, and some more good stuff. And then we will finish off by diving deep into a history of CGI. So until then, thank you, take care, stay safe. We'll see you next time.